Welcome to the Tech Transform podcast by Oliver White Asia Pacific. I'm your host, Rod Hozack, and for the first time since Oliver White started the business more than 50 years ago, we're going back to the future and we're going to talk tech. With a wealth of experience in melding technology with business processes, I'm excited to face up to the challenge we're all going to have, and that is how do we leverage the tools and data we have now and capitalise on what is coming at us without ending up with an assortment of uncoordinated tools and data sets being used to arrive at many different perspectives. After all, the goal in business should still be for everyone to be working to the same destination and same set of plans. We want to be with you on the journey, and as we learn, we want to share and help you navigate through this era where tech integration is not just nice to have, but it's going to be essential for maintaining competitiveness and relevance. Our mission is clear: to provide you with actionable insights and strategies that will keep you ahead in this dynamic tech environment. We've lined up a number of experts in planning systems and data management who are in the trenches now to give you a hands-on view. We will explore transformative insights from the last 30 to 50 years and peer into the future of tech in business planning. So be prepared to be inspired and equipped to face the changing tide of technology. So let's tech transform with Oliver White, navigating today, shaping tomorrow, and giving your career a head start by staying ahead of the tech curve. Before we get into the interview with Laura Tozzo, I want to cross over to Olga Papageorgiou, who has the latest news in data governance and AI. Welcome, Olga.
I'm excited to share insights from the State of AI in Retail and CPG report released by semiconductor chip manufacturer NVIDIA. This report surveyed hundreds of professionals in both industries. So this report reveals across retail and CPG that 42% of companies are actively using AI and 47% are assessing AI in their operations. Of those adopting AI, 54% are seeing it drive benefits, in particular, increasing revenue by more than 5%, and 58% found that it helped reduce cost by more than 5%. So based on these results, it's no surprise that 36% plan to increase their AI budgets by more than 20% in the next year. So when we deep dive into Gen AI in retail, I was surprised to see that the top use case was marketing content generation. So looking at images and text, videos, etc. And 60% of retailers were saying that they've successfully implemented this use case. Some other interesting use cases in the top 5 were personalized marketing, customer segmentation, and digital shopping assistance. And on supply chain side, so looking at more of your CPG type industries, there was no surprise, the biggest application here, which is the holy grail of demand forecasting and prediction, with 82% of organizations heavily investing in this space. The report highlighted that data and security are the top concerns of these organizations, and 60% of respondents cited data privacy, and then 49% cited that data security were the major issues that they were facing when it came to AI. What this shows us is, once again, that the foundation of AI success for organizations lies in having really robust data governance framework. What does all this mean for our listeners? In very simple terms, if you're not assessing how AI can help you gain competitive advantage in your organization, it's highly likely that your competitors, suppliers, or business partners, as more companies are shifting from experimentation to production of AI, they will embed it in their daily practices and see a profound shift in the way that their business operate. So if you'd like to learn more, you can find the State of AI in Retail and CPG report on the NVIDIA website. Are you planning to increase investment in AI? Or are you already seeing the benefits of it in your organization? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Once again, that was fabulous. More stuff coming at us all the time. So stay tuned. There'll be more next time. In today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Laura Tozzo on the topic, the evolution of SAP IBP solutions and how companies can integrate advanced forecasting methods. Laura is a product manager for SAP IBP for AI, with a background in mathematics and a focus on leveraging AI for demand forecasting and planning. Laura has also been at the forefront of applying machine learning to optimize supply chain processes. She'll share her insights into the future of AI in business planning, the evolution of SAP's IBP solution, and how companies can integrate advanced forecasting methods to drive smarter, data-driven decisions in an increasingly complex business environment. Hello, Laura, and thank you for agreeing to participate.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Are you ready for our first question?
Sure, let's go.
Getting started, can you define what AI is and how it's being integrated into the SAP offerings? Is it just automation?
Artificial intelligence refers to the possibility for a computer to simulate intelligent behavior, human behavior. Computers are also able to deal with much larger data sets than humans can. Sometimes artificial intelligence can even do more than what a typical human could do in the context of supply chains. No human will be able to plan the whole supply network in one go in a couple of hours, but artificial intelligence can. So it encompasses a lot of different algorithms types. So we have traditional ones like mathematical optimization. We, of course, have machine learning. We have, of course, also generative AI. So nowadays, in the last weeks and months, people tend to think AI is generative AI. Those are synonyms. And this, of course, is, in my opinion, not true, right? So the artificial intelligence field is much larger. It also does not necessarily mean automation. Automation is about making tasks automatically possible for computers. This can sometimes be achieved without artificial intelligence methods. Sometimes it can. There is an overlap between automation and artificial intelligence, but they are not the same thing. In terms of what SAP is doing with artificial intelligence, we use the broader meaning of artificial intelligence. So we do have these more traditional methods. We also have generative AI for sure. We are researching in the new trends around agents. And of course, automation is a very important topic at SAP, but it's not always artificial intelligence.
What I'm hearing is that the general term of artificial intelligence is a broad scope of activities, from the possibilities, as some people talk to me, of taking over everyone's job, which is out there, to stuff that we do every day with technology and automating tasks, which may not necessarily be AI. Thank you for that. But is it fair to say that AI is going to track and assess every click people are making on their computer and then give them guidance in how to manage that data?
That's indeed what sometimes people expect when we talk about AI. I would say this is not the reality of things, right? So it might be true if you're talking about a site where you're doing your shopping, that it makes sense for the website to track every click you're doing, to understand what you're liking, what you're not liking, remembering what you looked at already. But if you're looking in a business context, do you really want to track each user click, each user interaction with the system? First, there is, of course, a question of simply amount of data you would have to store, which would be exponential and not feasible in terms of data storage. Also, if you think about the business context in which users have some tasks they do every day, some tasks they do every week, some tasks they do every few months, of course, you don't want to track everything and have the system learn that every day the user is doing this and that, and then suggesting to the user to do this and that, although it did it already yesterday, right? But there is a balance that needs to be found in terms of what the system should be tracking and what this system should be suggesting. And to get there, to find the balance, I would say that's intelligent in itself. It still requires some time to understand what is the right data to collect from users.
So that actually, to summarize, and maybe a supplementary question, is we've actually got to know what we're looking for first, then use that as a case for being able to understand what we can use AI for, as opposed to what we can't. Would that be fair?
Definitely. I would say it makes sense to have a user story focus. Let's think about what the user would like to achieve, and let's maybe track the steps that are referred to this specific task, this specific set of tasks the user is doing, then learn from them rather than just track everything the user is doing every day.
So question 3, how is AI being applied in the area of forecasting sales, and are the outputs going to be trustworthy?
There are different AI things that can be used in forecasting. And I make examples now which are related to SAP integrated business planning, but I know that these methods are used also widely used overall. So first thing, for example, you can use AI to segment your products based on their importance and their volatility. So what we call the ABC XYZ segmentation. So you can use clustering methods, machine learning based methods to do this segmentation. Then, of course, you can use AI to determine whether there are any values that are not supposed to be there. So the classical outlier correction.
Yeah.
So also here, classical machine learning can definitely help in identifying and correcting these data points that could, at the end of the day, skew the forecast. And then, of course, last but not least, you have the forecasting methods themselves, which are based on machine learning, like the gradient boosting of decision trees that we have in integrated business planning. These methods are classical machine learning methods, which allow you to create the forecast in a more accurate way than traditional methods. If we think about the trustworthiness, first of all, the old saying always goes, garbage in, garbage out. So if your input data you're starting with is not in a good shape, of course, your output is also not going to be in a good shape. In general, results are trustworthy because what we are doing is applying a mathematical model, which is a fixed model in a sense. You can understand what was going on up to a certain point. Then that is not completely a black box, right? It's trustworthy. The problem is usually not that the results are not trustworthy. The problem is that the end users and the planners often do not trust the results because they are coming from an algorithm, from this machine learning algorithm that they are not familiar with. And the problem is people usually like to stick with the stuff they know how it works and they don't want to change. So here's a little bit of a change management topic, I would say, when you approach AI. And my suggestion is always to use these AI methods in parallel with the existing traditional methods that people have been using for years and track for a while the value add, right? So if you see consistently the machine learning method is actually bringing a better accuracy, that's when you can start trusting the results.
That's a great answer. One of the things I've picked up is we can, because of the nature of the data, go back to decisions we made several months or years ago in a strategic sense and connect that with the output. So connecting the cause and effect. Is that a fair comment?
That's exactly what we suggest to do in the beginning of an implementation project. Use the historical data you have and simulate what would the algorithm would have done with this past data so that you can track the value add.
And then the other thing, so this is supplementary because I get lots of questions from clients about this, and the statement might be, oh, I've got all this data. I just ask it to analyze the data that I've got, my sales data, and I correlate that with the Internet of Things, the weather, the economic climate, and magically it's going to assign weights to all that and come up with a good forecast. What would your comment be on that?
Sadly, the magic does not happen so easily. So, of course, again, the topic, the most important step there is always the data cleansing, right? The data preparation. And the truth of it is the weather topic is a particularly interesting one because it keeps coming up in many conversations with customers. And the point is that weather data is very unreliable. You can only trust your weather forecast a few days in advance. And most. And therefore, you have to wait whether this really brings value to your forecast, right? Because imagine the amount of effort you have to put in making sure you gather the weather data, it's clean and it fits to the level you're doing your forecast, but then it's only valuable for a few days in advance. Is it really worth it, right? There is a pros and cons estimate that needs to be done upfront. And in general, not all data is good data, right? What the system can do is tell you, does a correlation exist between the data and the sales history? And after you've done the forecast, it can tell you, did it actually have an impact on this forecast? Was this forecast generated using only the sales history, or was this additional data really having an impact and modifying the end result? This is something the system can definitely do for you, but the data preparation upfront, it's not necessarily something that the supply chain planning system would do for you, right? Here, you need a little bit of statistical knowledge and other tools to approach it.
Again, this is a supplementary question. When I was doing this, I was very heavy on my team about making sure we identify the assumptions, quantify them, time phase, and use that as the building blocks of the forecast. However, assumptions by their very nature, there's an uncertainty to them. So one of the things I used to say to the team is I want you to treat it as a scientific experiment. I want you to test the assumptions and figure out how we can come back and prove. For example, one experiment we did was doubling the sales force. Now, you couldn't afford to do that in one go because it was expensive. But we said instead of having one rep in a territory, we'll put 4 on and see what happens. Now, that was very old, clunky, labour-intensive way of doing things. Are there any clues or suggestions how we can do that in current systems using the technology?
For sure. So first of all, I would agree that you have to start from an assumption. There is an unlimited amount of data out there you could be using, but the expectation is your company, you know which factors potentially impact your forecast. And this is my expectation. If not you, there's going to be some analyst, someone in the company who has an idea of the drivers of the sales in your company. So that's the starting point, I would say. These factors, although they are from a business perspective, they seem relevant, they might still not be relevant from a statistical perspective. So that's usually the second step, verify whether it's really statistically relevant. This is where correlation analysis comes in. And this is something that, for example, in SAP IBP, you can also do in the system. We have a correlation tool, which came in pretty recently, which you can use to check the correlation between the sales history and different time series and additional data that you might want to use for the forecast. So this is an upfront check before you run the forecast. Now that you nailed it down to maybe 20 variables that you want to add to the forecast, you can add them all, run the forecast, and then run a variable impact analysis. So this is a post-analysis after the forecast has been run, which tells you how much the single variables actually impacted the forecast. Here is where you find out, okay, of these 20 variables, some of them only have 0.0 something percent of impact, so they are not really telling me much. They are possibly making only noise. And so that's where you can do the second round of restricting the variables that you're using for the forecast. That's usually the steps I would suggest going through. And again, all of this you can do in IBP. I want to be transparent. You can also do this outside of IBP, for example, right? If you have a data science team, in some bigger companies, this is often the case. You can do this proving the assumptions and outside of your supply chain system, making different proof of concepts. After you've come down with a set of variables you know are relevant, then start the integration into the system, right?
That's a fabulous answer. I remember doing it. I got down to 12 assumptions and I said, that's too many. How about we get 5? So we've got everything in the system. It enables us to build the model transparently. Thank you. That does now go on to question 4, which is about data. So data is still the foundation of AI and needs to be in good shape. Are there any approaches being made to automate data integrity as a foundation of good outputs?
One point, of course, I already mentioned before is the part of outlier correction, making sure that there are no weird data points which are going to skew the forecast. But of course, there is other things that one needs to consider, especially in the area of forecasting, missing data. This happens where you have some periods, some days, some weeks where for whatever reason, data was not integrated into the system. And this can also have an impact in the forecast. So that's also important to make sure you don't have any holes in your data. So in SAP IBP, we have this feature called the substitute missing values, which takes care of removing the nulls that you have in your data and help preparing the data. And these two are the approaches I would suggest in general for the transactional data, so the time series data. Of course, there is also the need to have good master data, right? So to make sure that the master data is consistent. So also for that, there are methods. In SAP IBP, for example, we have these discovered patterns in master data, which allow you to check for anomalies in the attributes of the master data. But we also have, and here is where the topic AI versus automation comes back into play. There is also the topic of automating master data and data integration and making sure that during the integration, certain things are always checked, making sure that certain things are always checked, right? So you have certain business rules. You know your master data is supposed to look like ABC. So you can maintain rules and make sure the system automatically checks whenever there are changes in the master data and corrects anomalies, right? And this is also something we have. We call it master data rules. And it's nothing AI per se, but it's definitely automation.
So it sounds like you're getting some good tools around that one. One supplementary question for that would be, when we're talking about the data fields, what type of data would you be looking for in that master data?
It could be any attribute. It's mostly based on the main master data type we have, which is product, location, and customer. These are also, it depends a little bit on the level at which you want to do the forecast. Some might be doing it at the lowest level, and some might be doing it at a more aggregated level. Yeah. Especially if you think about the hierarchy attributes. So a product is part of a product group, which is part of a product family, which is part of a product category, or these kind of things, right? And you have to make sure that the relationship is correct, that all these attributes are maintained properly, so that when you decide to do the forecast at the product group level, you're actually forecasting the product group that you're expecting to forecast. If the attribute was not maintained properly, that doesn't work. So this is the kind of things that one might want to check.
And for our fifth question, before we get on to the client question, I have to ask this one as a standard question, but let's give it a go. What do you think the future is going to look like with AI in companies, and what preparation should they be doing right now in anticipation?
At the moment, I definitely think the future is going to be around AI agents. I think people might have heard about them in the past weeks and months. And of course, we are still at the beginning here. We are still talking about a research topic. It's nothing that's ready to be productized tomorrow. But I do think they might have a huge impact, especially in the area of supply chain and supply chain planning, because it's indeed an area where there is a lot of need for automation. And at the same time, you cannot automate without having a certain business knowledge. So here I expect that if you can have agents which have a certain role, you can actually achieve quite a bit of things. So what I expect is that they will be able to use the existing tools, these narrow AI things we already have in place, like the supply optimizer, like the machine learning forecast. They're still going to be there. They're not going anywhere. The plan is still going to be done by them. But I expect the agents to know when to call these algorithms, to orchestrate the algorithms through the use of generative AI. So it's going to be a mixture of methods, I expect, with the goal, of course, of achieving almost autonomous planning, where the planner can focus on exceptions and not have to check things day in and day out, and where they get proactive recommendations from the system. As I said, I still think this is quite some years away, but I believe that's the direction. What can companies start to do? I think there is a lot to do in terms of enablement. There is no trust in the narrow AI, like the machine learning forecast, from end users, which to me is weird, because those are really trustworthy algorithms. At the same time, there is a lot of trust towards generative AI tools, ChatGPT, where people tend to trust the answer simply because it's written in a natural language. There is a need for enablement of the end users to understand what can they trust, what they can trust, and what are the tools actually able to do, so that they can feel comfortable in using them for the proper things. Right? You do not want to ask generative AI to create the forecast for you. That's a bad idea. I've heard this time and time again, that users tend to trust the answers from a chatbot which talks to them in natural language, and still they don't trust the mathematical model that instead gives them the forecast. So I think there is a need, let's say, a basic AI understanding for people to be able to use them in the future.
That's interesting. One of the guests I had on earlier said, don't fall for the trap that some of the outcomes are hallucinations. He said, all the outcomes of generative AI are hallucinations. It's just some are useful. It was a fabulous way to put it. I went, yep, I'm going to keep that one. I get that. Thank you for that. And the other thing to summarize is the training and the education around what it can do, what to look out for. Obviously, sitting around that is confidentiality and data management. But we've got to raise the knowledge for what we can do now and wait for what's going to happen tomorrow, because it keeps expanding.
It's changing very fast, for sure.
The last question from our client feedback. Now, I read these verbatim because I don't want to lose the meaning. This question is, for me, the one most important thing would be how we'll enhance AI, our forecasting accuracy to improve operational costs and efficiency. That is inventory optimization, storage costs, and slog reduction, so slow moving and obsolete. And then there's a supplementary question that he's asked is, how will it analyse various sources of international supply chain data that considers significant geopolitical and weather events, port strikes, Red Sea embargo, the Panama Canal blockage, droughts, etc., to mitigate out of stocks? I know it's a massive question, but maybe a commentary rather than an answer.
Sure. For the first part, how to enhance the forecast accuracy and improve operational costs, there is only so far you can go with traditional methods in terms of forecast accuracy. At some point, if you want to reach the next level of accuracy, you will need to go towards more complex methods, AI methods, and take into account additional data. Forecast accuracy directly has an impact on storage costs. The better your forecast accuracy is, the better your inventory plan is, and therefore your overall costs are going to be lower. So there is a very direct impact of the forecast accuracy to the operational costs. How do you get the data in the first place? In SAP especially, IBP is not a lonely solution. There are a lot of other things out there. We have SAP DataSphere and the newly announced Business Data Cloud, which are tools for customers to collect the data, manage the data, and integrate the right data into the other solutions.
Yeah.
But if we talk about geopolitical situations and events, I think this is a misconception that people have. Because the truth is, AI can only predict things that already happened in the past. They cannot predict the Black Swan event. They cannot predict something that nobody knows is going to happen. So if you as a human cannot predict this, how can you expect the machine to know? So I think it's a misconception of generating a long-term forecast versus reacting to these events. I do not believe there is any proper way to integrate geopolitical events in the long-term forecast, because as I said, this is based on the historical data. You need to know something that already happened in the past so you can reproduce it in the future. That's the only way it works. What you can do is the whole topic of risk management, right? So making sure that you get notified early whenever an unprecedented situations happen and react fast. So if you have the visibility on your supply chain, if all the data is in one place, then you can make sure you react fast. This is one of the topics where maybe AI agents will help in the future, right? They see in the news there is an event, they send in a notification, maybe they proactively suggest a few scenarios of what could you do now to react to this situation. This is for sure a possibility. I do not think that it's necessarily tied to the forecast.
That's a great answer. If I get better forecast accuracy, I will be able to get better operational efficiencies. The key is the forecast has to be linked to the operations planning and supply planning side, which I often see companies race after a forecasting package, but forget how that's going to be integrated into the planning system. Now, on the Black Swan events, actually, it's an unusual thing to say to an Australian because we have Black Swans, believe it or not. But going with the point of the Black Swan event, the value of the technology, I believe, is that, yes, we'll get a signal, but if we've got an integrated approach to this, we can run those simulations and say, what if this, what if that?
Yes. And
which, as one client said to me, oh, yeah, we do the simulations, we do them in spreadsheets, and they take about 4 weeks to run through and get all the approvals. I know. Oh, no. I'd like to be able to press a button.
There are already simulation options in the systems right now. What if scenarios are already there? But I'm expecting this to become more automated in the future with the help of agents and generative AI.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Laura, thanks for your time. That's the end of the questions I have. I'm sure the listeners will get a lot of value out of it. Thanks for joining us. Any final remarks before I let you go?
I really enjoyed the conversation and I'm really happy to be here. I think artificial intelligence is here to stay, also in the supply chain planning. So definitely worth for everybody to start looking into the topic and get familiar with it.
Are you okay if people want to reach out to you and ask questions, or should they go through a different SAP route?
I'm okay with people reaching out. I am on LinkedIn, so they can feel free to contact me there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Tech Transform with Oliver White, and thank you, Dr. Laura Tozzo. We hope you've taken some learnings from this practical assessment of planning tools and readiness for AI. Remember, it's not just about having data, but taking a mindset that technology enhances human decision-making, not replaces it. Don't miss our next episode where we'll continue the journey into the evolving state of technology. Make sure you subscribe and join us again to keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in tech transformation. If you'd like to talk to us about how we can help your business with tech transformation, contact us at information@oliverwhite.com or go to our website at www.oliverwhiteasiapacific.com. Let's tech transform with Oliver White, navigating today, shaping tomorrow, and giving your career a head start by staying ahead of the tech curve. See you next time.